All right, EPEL.next, by the EPEL Steering Committee. Where we were, where we are, and what we can do. What can we do? Because things change and places never stay the same. Where we were, EPEL stands for Extra Packages for Enterprise Linux. We never came up with a better name for the project because by the time we actually thought about coming up with the project name, we had already been calling it Extra Packages for a long time.
It is a lot of name recognition right now.
Oh yes, yes, yes. I wouldn't change the name for it. Even if it turned out to be a swear word in some other language. I'm going to say Dutch. Everything's a swear word in Dutch. You can say kava in Dutch.
Oh, you gotta take that back.
Come on, say coffee in Dutch. Yes, see, you swore. You just told my mother something. Okay. It was formed late in the process. RHEL had been out for a while. I think it was just as RHEL 5 was being released. There was a lot of need of extra packages and things, but people needed more stuff than what was in the release. At the time, there were a ton of other repositories that you could use. DAG, Fresh RPMs, Free RPMs, Bob's RPMs, Mom's RPMs. None of them use the same stuff. And you might need a package from DAG's RPMs and Fresh RPMs, and you'd find out that they actually use the same file location. You couldn't get what you needed worked on.
None of them actually did not compromise the base OS.
No, no, it didn't.
All of them compromised the base OS somewhere.
Yes. We decided, as we were looking at this and we were listening to stuff, and people had a problem set, was that we should build a repository based off of Fedora, because we knew Fedora shouldn't compromise the base OS of RHEL, because, well, Fedora was sort of the upstream of RHEL. Good. That was unintentional, really. We started off by supporting RHEL 4 and 5. And by the time we actually even got going, Cell 6 was out, I think. The original idea, because of the release cycles, were that RHEL was going to be supported for...
It was 3 and 4, and by the time we really got going, 5 did that.
Okay, thank you. I was looking at this. I wrote these about a half hour ago when somebody said, you need to have something in the paper to talk about what's going on. Oh, okay. I thought it was a hacker.
Next.
So, 5-7 years was the support life of Enterprise Linux, and well, we figured we could support stuff for that long, you know. And there was lots of controversies that came on because every one of those repos didn't call themselves. You'd see a package that was called Apache 2.dag.rpm. Some other stuff in there, or fresh RPMs. And so repo tags was the repository tag that was put in the name. And because of the build system at the time we were using, we couldn't stick in repo tags without a lot of hacking that nobody seemed to want to do. We said we weren't going to do it, and that caused...
It was the upstream for the packages not doing any repo tags. That was the actual problem, because you needed to not only port it off to EPEL,
Yeah.
you needed to then modify the spec and to include the repo tag. That was...
Well, the idea was that, by some people, was that the build system would just stick it in there.
Yeah.
So, off the tree. Anyway, repo tags is for the people who have dealt with that for a long time, is the first thing that you know how long you've been there, because you'll remember the long flame wars that make developers look like kindergarten. Where we are now, this is a graph. My God, it doesn't tell you what it says because the things don't look good on there. I am very sorry. It looks better on my screen. So, the green line, that is the number of Fedora users. Measured by unique IPs that hit Mirror Manager every day.
And did you apply the 15% margin of just based on the hardware profile?
All I did was I do a unique IP address. It shows up 10 times in one day, it's counted as one. If it shows up once, it's counted as one. If it shows up once every 6 days, it's counted once every 6 days. There was lots of other cleans and stuff, but I've realized I needed to have a very simple methodology, because otherwise I end up with, you made my data look funny. So, as you look over time, this goes from 2008 to beginning of this year. See that little green dip there? That's the incident. That was when, yeah.
Thanks, that's probably a capital case.
The red line, that's Apple. So sometime in,
This is when we applaud ourselves.
yes. Sometime in 2011, the number of Apple users surpassed, or Apple machines, I should say, not users, because we don't know if it's a user or the checking. Pardon?
What was the date then?
I have to get the other graphic up, I'm sorry. I can't see it on here.
Yeah,
It's-
just repeat, yeah.
I think it was sometime in 2011, I believe. Basically, we've had a continual rise in the number of machines using, oh, the fuzziness, just so you know, because everyone asks me, why is it so thick? When it's down at the bottom, that's a weekend. When it's up top, it's a weekday. So what you're looking at is how many pretty much workstations are turned off over the weekend. And you can see that for Apple, it has gotten bigger, fatter over time as more people seem to be using it for systems that are only open, turned on Monday through Friday.
This is probably yet even worse, a low estimate than, let's say, the unique IP addresses that pull for our merit for updates for Fedora. Because
There's
many
what?
enterprises using Apple use the rsync into an internal merit.
Yeah. So both of these numbers are not absolutes, they are minimums. All right. Again, a completely fuzzy graph that makes no sense without me telling you what it is. This is the releases. The top blue line is the combined. Green line is RHEL 5. As you can see, it sort of has maxed out around, I think it's 25,000 systems. The blue line that's growing is the RHEL 6 line.
45?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's the number who hit once a day,
Yeah,
so,
many systems of which are coming from the same IP address.
great. Well, actually, I do cut that down because you can pick out just a little bit of data noise in there too. If I see that, I count them twice. Okay, anyway, that's our current, we have a very large user base, or system base, I should say. And both RHEL 5 and RHEL 6 are large portions of it. Where are we now? We support 3 different OSs, or 3 different architectures, EPC 64, x86-64, and x86-32. In RHEL 4, we have 1,258 source packages. It's end of life. We still have people grabbing stuff out of there. RHEL 5, we have 3651. As you can see, RHEL 6 is our largest, and RHEL 7 is growing. I expect Rail 5 used to be larger, but as people have moved to wanting to support Rail 6, and stuff has become not upgraded, stuff has been pulled out of Rail 5. What are our current problems in EPEL? Yes, I pronounce it EPEL. There's a huge argument over it. Is it EPEL or EPEL? I'm on the EPEL side.
So one other thing on the current state of things and possibly predicted future, for the first time, the repo file is going to be shipped in CentOS with CentOS, as I understand it. So that might make a faster growth curve for 7. It'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah, well, 6 is already sort of shipped, so
Yeah.
our 7 is already sort of shipped.
Yeah, so as your stats start growing for 7, it'll be interesting to see if that jumps up faster.
Yeah.
That repo file is in the CentOS repos, but it's not installed by default or anything.
Yeah.
But it's still, the barrier is one step lower.
Yeah, you're right.
All right, so what are our problems? The first problem that developers who are in EPEL run into is we have 10 plus years of support of the upstream Red Hat Enterprise Linux. That means you're looking at supporting a package with EPEL for a decade or more, depending on when it goes in. And that's a lot of time for a lot of people to dedicate to anything. We have requests for new and old conflicting packages. Under our naming schemes, we're using the Fedora naming scheme. If you have something like Ruby, you might have 3 different Rubies that are needed, but we've used Ruby as.
Since this is base OS, I wouldn't necessarily say Ruby, but take Puppet as an example. It's still Puppet 2, you cannot just upgrade from Puppet 3, and so Puppet 3 cannot go into Apple because we sort of like made a promise we're not going to give you any unpleasant surprises.
Yes.
That's as far as the promises go as well, but you cannot now run a packaged Puppet server on an enterprise Linux system for your Fedora workstation.
What he's saying is basically one of the promises that EPEL has given, and I forgot to put in the slide here, is we've promised that users of the repository system will not be surprised. Unpleasantly. As in, today you've got package A there, you do a yum update, and all the configs are wiped, or
The old configs are incompatible.
compatible, your application stops working at 2 o'clock in the morning because you have a problem like that. Lots of people run a cron yum update, so that was the major thing, was that to make sure that when people who run a cron update do not end up with broken systems. But we have 2 different audiences, and when you listen to them on the mailing list, they're both about the same size. People need major changes. I need the latest Ruby on Rails. People need no changes. I need this version of Ruby on Rails that is no longer supported by anybody, but if I touch it, my entire company goes down. That's standard enterprise Linux problems, but it's one that Fedora has never been really set up to deal with. And one that we in EPEL run into, which has turned one of the other things that I did get on there, developer burnout. We have ups and downs of swings, and people who come into EPEL love EPEL, and then after about a year or 2 are completely burnt out on trying to support something that they can't do. They can't upgrade the application they wanted to upgrade. And we can't announce it in a way that, one of our problems is we've never had a way, we don't do release management for EPEL per release. It's out there, and it's sort of like I won't say it's a rawhide, it's more like
It's rolling.
it's a rolling rails sand pit. Tar pit, that's the word. Once it's in there, you're just kind of stuck in it, but new stuff gets piled on all the time. Which brings me to the next part of the last part now, which is where we start with the workshop. Where are we going? And that is where I'm looking for feedback originally from users here so that I can figure out ways that we can better serve the community. Now I have to figure out how to bring this.
So let me throw out a straw man proposal just for something to start with, I guess. We have a new repo called EPEC that's been tossed around before that has a 3-year lifespan, and basically it possibly includes things like SCLs for having different versions of things within there.
Oh, I haven't got, sorry.
Sorry, you're not ready for that?
Yeah, I'm not ready for that. First thing I wanted to do was find out from the audience pain points, or how people are using things first. Then I can go into, sorry.
All right, yeah, no, sorry. Jump ahead, go ahead.
It's okay. And I need to figure out how to mirror this, but I can't. So we'll just, okay, pain points.
That's it for the, or are you in no news at all?
I know. I'm not a Red Hat really good people.
Neither am I, but I didn't know you.
I'm using K-Rate.
Maybe you get trade jobs.
Actually, we do a major part of the KD development, so I should know this because I'm the technical team. But anyway.
Anyway, so you first.
So,
Your name?
my name is Jeroen Pomero, and I'm a proverbial idiot, not on anyone's paper. So one of the pain points that I've experienced is the inability to downgrade, basically, because only so many versions of the updates that are released are actually included in the recon schedule. Does that make sense? Yeah.
In the regular repo, for like Red Hat Fedora, if you do it in your updates tree, we have a releases tree and an updates tree. The release has a sort of a static what we released at. And then the updates tree has multiple, how many do we keep of?
One.
Oh, well, I thought it was two.
No, we keep one. Mesh only is able to get the newest package from the tag
Okay.
when it puts it in. So that's the bottleneck.
No,
Yeah,
in
one
Fedora.
more roll.
In Fedora,
Right.
Yeah,
if I do a yum downgrade, where does it get the downgraded package from?
release.
Release.
Yeah,
Or updates testing. As you
sure, whatever.
Yeah.
So this pain point's not unique to EPEL though.
It's not exclusive to Apple, but in Fedora, it can make sense to only include the latest update. In Apple, it makes more sense to include all updates ever released.
So,
Because the next update might be that unpleasant surprise for whatever reason, valid or not. And then a young downgrade gets a lot of that scenario, but a young downgrade doesn't work because only the latest update is included on the merge.
so it's, yeah, there's no release to go back to, there's only latest.
And the update cycle for people who are running Grill with Apple is probably longer. In other words, they're queuing updates for, up to a month at a time before they finally decide to push it out. And by that time, it's been removed.
And of course, on the consuming side, you have the service window schedule. If at all, community back service window, then you can't just say willy-nilly every day, a day or so, a young reply update, and I'll see what the results.
I'm looking for a mouse that doesn't exist, so.
Mickey.
Yes, he says, you figured out editor.
Good record.
I think it's,
I think it's in that.
are you looking for writing or something else?
Wrapping, so-
I think it's F11 or 10.
View, your view up there is in view. Depending on where we're at.
There you go. Yeah.
Sorry,
So This also brings us to another pain point, because not every stage at which Apple is necessarily suitable to be included in Anaconda as a repo, and obey my every Kickstart command. Because the dependencies might not necessarily resolve. Now, that's a separate problem to resolve, but I would like the separation between release and updates. Because I know that I can always install release, and then I'll see afterward what I can update. These don't make sense.
Okay, except right now, Apple doesn't really have a concept of release.
That's what he's saying.
That's what I'm
His
saying.
problem is that we don't have a concept of release. Let me change that to
The
that.
alternative is to include all updates, because then I can let Yum and RPM solve it,
Yeah.
right? Because I have all versions available, so the missing dependencies for a newer version will cause me to have to install the later version at that point. Or the separation of release and updates, because I do need that installation to succeed.
Does not have a good idea of-
Resolve that.
But it almost sounded like there were two complaints. The idea that it doesn't have the idea of releases and the fact that it may or may not be tested.
Yeah, actually, the
But the neighbor
dependencies
should
should,
Sorry.
I'm good with it.
Well, okay, so it's worse.
Guys,
actually, the dependencies should match the actual minor release. Let's say for 6.6, if there is a new Kickstartable tree, then the packages, the newest
That's-
ones should
that's-
match this.
that's something I wanted to bring up later, but at this moment, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It will basically match whatever, so if I built Ansible, or let's say, give me a NetHack, that's my favorite one. I build NetHack with 6.0. I don't rebuild it with 6.1. Hello? No.
Yeah, the wires on.
6.1, I don't rebuild it. 6.2, I don't rebuild it. Stuff could have changed in the base OS, because it does. I mean, Red Hat has to change stuff every now and then. It tries to keep stuff, and it doesn't, because
It's
the world
only
changes.
actually- It's only actually finally stable at 1.5. I didn't say that, you didn't hear it.
What?
Anyway,
At times it can take ridiculously long to push updates through Bodhi. And I'm not talking about the combo policy or quarantine, but due to the fact that signing the packages is manual as I understand it, and it's done not very frequently for EPEL, particularly on weekends or around the holiday. If I get a CD, and even if I act promptly, it can take 7 days, even if everybody's giving comma to ever arrive at a customer.
But this is a global problem and not specific to Apple.
It's sourced with Apple.
I'm extremely surprised by that, because we've been pushing updates on it daily, except for, there were 3 days when a bunch of us were traveling to Flock this recent time. But Apple updates push pretty much daily, every day.
But regardless, it's not Apple specific. If it were a problem, it's a
I've
global problem.
I've been pushing them at night when I've got home from Flock the last 2 nights, so they've gone out at that point. So I'm surprised why you're seeing 7
No, it's not
days.
that recent.
Okay, just a while back.
See, that's what I mentioned.
Okay. But yes, it is a problem everywhere, because signing and.
So let's not stuff that into this session because we're
Yes.
just into Apple stuff. But Luke has a point there as well, with the point releases, basically. The separation of point releases could be useful. I've not run into this stuff myself, but I can see how, but you stick to the 6.4 and the 6.5 is released, and Apple does that update, like it comes on what is in 6.5, then all of a sudden certain packages do build or be included or whatnot. The Apple 6 state is basically not 6.4 compatible anymore because of that, and if in an enterprise need, you do still have 6.4, then
That's actually been, I think, something Apple has explicitly stated a few times, that we always are targeting the latest one.
Yeah.
And you're right, there's a need for it,
yeah.
but it's more manpower, because then you have to
Yeah,
at least
and-
archive each one of those.
And send to us equally well moves
Yeah.
forward.
Right.
Like that practically.
my personal view on if you have to need 6.3 and Word 6.6 or 6.9 or 67, get a contract.
Yeah.
Somebody to do it. I don't care who it is, but you need a contract
I
because,
have a contract.
Right.
With unlimited guests, essentially.
anyway, but you need to have somebody else doing it for you, or hire somebody to do it yourself. EPEL is a volunteer activity, so there's a point where we say,
But I think the point is that, the point is not, this is what we're expecting of Apple when we're consuming it. I think perhaps the point is, could we build the structure in such a way that potentially would allow for this type of volunteer contribution to come from the stakeholders that actually have that kind of interest?
I don't
So
know.
that you do a 6.0, 6.1, 6.2, but that in principle you just on the mirror, you assume them as like sent to us costs. At first. But then at least you have a placeholder where you can say, I'm using my major and minor version of the base release to hit the mirror.
I think
Even
we
though
are
everybody
doing
else
that
is the
already,
same.
actually.
No, you're not.
Okay, well,
It's 6 servers, 6
Yes, sir.
workstations.
Yeah, I think not every maintainer is probably aware that promise don't make surprises.
Yeah.
I remember that recently
It-
the Facebook team had the problem with the Cobbler maintainer who broke the compatibility and was not don't accept the objection and didn't want to revert the change. So what to do with those maintainer?
So maybe that is also because it's not actually a promise. It's sort of like the guideline that Apple says, no unpleasant surprises, please, pretty please, puppy face.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
And so we
it's,
don't keep maintainers to it.
it's guidelines, and sometimes it's hard to find the details on that. I know when I was going back when I was maintaining it, trying to figure out what I was supposed to and not supposed to do, in that whole release.
okay, I'm gonna put this down clearly as the next thing on here. Guidelines are mostly oral, not formalized.
Oral, not verbal, seems that way, verbal, not better.
But, you know, I said that's also not specific to,
Not.
Apple.
No, it's not, but-
But you're not supposed to do huge breaking changes within a Fedora release, but that doesn't stop you.
No, I understand that, but we have a smaller base to deal with than Apple or Fedora, and so we should be a bit more.
Instead of seem aware of dump break stuff, it seems more like not all maintainers agree on how to interpret dump break stuff.
Well,
Because
but normally are you also on a consuming site, if you're still willing to maintain an Apple?
No,
And
no, that's not the case.
are people just saying like, I'm a Fedora package, as if it's for Apple is all fire and forget?
Well, yeah, it's good. Well, no, it's not fire and forget, it's more like, people have, the maintainer, okay, Joe, out in, has a server, or needs NetHack, because he really needs it badly at 2 o'clock in the morning. The NetHack maintainer doesn't run Apple, it doesn't run EL6, it doesn't run EL5, it doesn't run EL4, he only runs Fedora.
Right.
He says, okay, I can do this. I can just drop NetHack in there. You know, it's just 2 Koji commands, or whatever we're using these days. Fed package.
Well, it's a branch request and
Yeah.
the original review request.
Blah, 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 blah. We're all done. I got it down. Okay, I put it out into Apple 5, Apple 6. Now, he doesn't know that Bob or Joe has actually tied in that it's his PS, it's sort of like the game where they made Doom into your PS killer. Kill processes by shooting demons. Well, all the different processes on the server are Amoeba and Algae and Cobalt and init1 is Balrog. In NetHack. Well, he updates. He runs it off. He doesn't know. He's just going to run updates for all this stuff because he's going to NetHack 6. NetHack 5.9 is not good enough for Unicode.
I see where you're going with this.
He fires it off, it goes off into EPEL 5, EPEL 6, I do a yum update, okay, so I got EPEL 6, but the guy who's maintaining it doesn't know about what Joe's using it for. Joe just requested it. Guy was being nice and happy, okay, I can do it, it's not that much work. But it, all of a sudden, the Balrog is killed because it's become a Kanjis. And all the servers go down. Anyway, there's a lot of packages. The way we have most of our 5,000 packages in EL6 are out of requests to maintainers. The maintainers don't run enterprise, they just are listening to requests and say,
Fair enough, so there's two parts of this that I think matter, and that is one, what made the maintainer just update it, there's probably some unawareness about it, about wanting to be kept, stable-ish, no, wasn't surprised, but two, wasn't it proper for them to, when requested, also offer to co-maintain the package for the bottom branch? And I mean proper form like gentlemanly like.
yeah, that's the problem is we don't have a lot of gentlemen. I mean,
Well, I'm one of those, and then I get unresponsive maintainer.
yeah. So anyway,
We also end up with some people want updates and some people don't want updates, and so one person says, I need an update of this, and look for.
Kanji. All my monsters need to be in Kanji. Okay.
And then they do it, and then the other person says, wait, I need this not to happen, and so.
Yeah.
The poor guy in the middle doesn't know what.
Yeah, he decides he's going to pull his package out of that. Okay, anyway, we have a lot of guidelines that are mostly verbal, not written. We have no enforcement of those guidelines.
I think that's a separate thing. Yeah. Not that I'm asking them to enforce strict guidelines, but.
Well, I mean, it comes up. I mean, how do you deal with this? So anyway, we have
Well, perhaps that is expectation then.
So we have a lot of pain points that we've had over the time. What other pain points have people run into?
You just mentioned that developers often are not actually using enterprise Linux. At some point, one could get entitled to have an EL license. That process was relatively difficult, and it only lasted for a year. If you could make that process easier, maybe that would.
If I could make that process easier, I could also become a billionaire overnight. I will put it in, I am more likely to become that billionaire. I'm sorry, I understand, it's just, there is a lot of things that are opaque even to me, and I kind of know what's going on, that are due to laws and stuff of how stuff gets written and paid for. At this point, I say,
The situation may happen is that collaboration with centers. I don't know.
but,
Problem is, you can't just send us the test of a new Apple 7 packages into the Apple 7 tests for Apple 7.
well,
And now,
we're,
7 in slipstream with rating and release and sent to us 7.
yes,
Yeah,
we're
that's-
working, that was one of the things I was hoping to have some of the census people here so that we could.
I won't lie, I was waiting for Central 7. Just I have my enterprise Linux licenses and subscriptions and shit, so I was wondering why it was waiting on.
We've always waited for CentOS in the past, every release we've done,
So
because,
is that the argument?
Well, I
We
guess-
are waiting because we always wait.
yeah,
I think the traditional argument has been that we can't expect our contributors to all have Logrel, and so in order for them to test their packages, running their packages rather than just, oh, we built some Koji, it must be fine, they need to be able to get a hold of CentOS and install it so that they can test their packages. I think that's been the traditional direction of operating.
The Apple put in the request for resources from the infrastructure team in order to allow some people to focus and grow at this point. And by the way, CentOS 7, of course, is speeded up greatly over, let's say, 706.
yeah. Well, in any case, there is a problem of the chicken and egg of dealing with getting access to a enterprise license or an enterprise Linux can test what you're trying to do for somebody else.
There's trial subscriptions available.
Pardon?
There are probably trial.
Yes, there are trial subscriptions or prescriptions, depending on how you see it.
Well, if you want to let me now, then it's a prescription.
Yes. No. Anyway, okay, getting back to stuff. We have a bunch of pain points. The thing is how we can deal with those pain points to move to the next level of fixing things. And we are at a good point of fixing things because we have Enterprise 7 in beta form. We have a lot of changes going on in EPEL.next, and it's time we can look at how those changes are rolling out to implement them into enterprise packages or extra Linux. Anyway, so ideas to deal with pain.
So, while I give all the games for the Ubuntu developers, can we ask the Red Hat to give at least one license for each EPEL maintainer?
We have asked. The problem is that enterprise Linux licenses fall under certain tax issues, and so it has to be tracked and such. So we have to collect information to deal with that. That's partially the reason why I'm saying it's easiest to go with the CentOS side.
Yeah.
And run it in a VM.
It's nearly the same well.
I know, I understand, and we can ask. It's just if you're going to ask, and I think we have a process still. Just be prepared. It'll take a while. We can't just turn it off.
So what Red Hat has done is give discounts for like Red Hat engineering training and certification to your users. So the discount mechanism works. With the 100% discount mechanism doesn't work.
Yes.
So,
Why?
so the current,
Why? Let's say that their SAP is incapable of parsing this in a way that the IRS finds corporately responsible.
can
Let's
I
say that
interject
that
for a
is-
moment? So the process as it is now, doesn't work very well, it takes a long time. I've talked
Not
with,
transparent.
and it's not transparent, and I've talked with Paul Fields,
No, he's talking to someone else.
and he has been talking to people above him, and we're hoping to improve the procedure. But I don't know if that's gonna happen, so I can't promise it. because I don't
I
know.
think that since we use the Arching development, it should be
I hope
I
that,
hope so, but we've been waiting and we've had it for a long time, so
I cannot promise anything, but we are trying to make it actually work.
we're trying. I just say that if you are needing it and you need it now, use either CentOS or the other one.
Scientific
Yes.
Almost there.
And I cannot use spaces on this blankety blank keyboard. Okay, anyway. Fermi Linux, because we're in Europe, and when in Europe, do what as the Europeans. Okay. Yes, Matt, it's now time for you to make your speech.
The thing I said before, so, I don't know how directly all of this relates to things that were said as problems here. In fact, I don't know if
It's okay.
it might be that this relates to something that was important but kind of left unsaid and we looked at the pain points. But, an entirely separate repo that focuses on a shorter life cycle, so that there's an option to choose between the longer life cycle, call it REL style things, and something that is a little bit more disposable, but long enough to live, we can live with it. 3 years. Because 3 years is kind of a magic number here.
And is Epic,
As
is it
they're
talking
running
stages, or is it further than talking stages, or what's the status?
What's that?
Here's my mouse.
What's the status of Epic? Is it still just, we're talking about it,
I
or?
believe I have described its existence in entirety just now.
Okay.
I am epic.
I'm sorry, which one is which?
Yeah,
Which?
it does, like, Epic would be the long one.
How big is the long one?
Yeah, no, epic is the short one.
Yeah, sorry, the name is backwards.
Enterprise packages for
Infrastructure.
co-locations, collections.
Creativity.
Creativity. Anyway, epic would be,
It doesn't need to be called that, we can call it something
Well,
else.
an epic is something long.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it depends, at EPEL or at EPOC. Depends on which. So is it epically awesome, or does it take?
I think we should have an entire break.
Epically awesome was the idea. The name comes from Robin.
Fucking open those names.
So, for the sake of discussion, I guess I'll.
EPUB not forever until 2029.
Nice.
So that's one idea.
Well, actually, Debian has a repository called Debian Volatile. This would also solve problems with, for example, Clan AV. They change their database formats every whatever release, and so there is always the latest and greatest, even for Debian stable.
Is that Volt?
Volatile.
Volatile. Sorry, I don't hear well. I apologize.
Separately also they have backbones, right, which is a little less wonky, but still includes the newer versions.
Oh, sorry.
You have it.
So we should all switch to Debian, is that the solution?
No, but it's a good idea to have something like that for particular packages which are changing so fast that it doesn't make any sense.
For example,
It's impossible to backport them all the
they
time.
use it for anti-error scanners, for example.
Okay.
Like-
Maybe something like that. Like,
Okay. Just the difficult packages, basically.
Go ahead and ask something that may be a stupid question.
they're all stupid.
Yeah, it would be, well,
Every question is
I remember what a teacher of mine once said, there's no such thing as stupid questions, just stupid people. So, yeah, I think of all the people I know who use older releases of RHEL, the people who are still on RHEL 5, the people who are on early releases of RHEL 6, and most of them, because of the environment they're in, can't use EPEL in the first place. I mean, do we really need EPEL to be supported for 10 years?
For every person you know like that, I know at least 4 or 5 people who have to.
Have to? Okay. So then I think that was the missing part, because most of the people I know who are on older versions are US defense stuff where they're very heavily firewalled and they can't use.
I know a lot of people who are on those things who have their own repositories of Apple.
And it's just the people I know.
It's just
Yeah, no, I understand.
Any company
It
that
depends
has
on your vault.
Anything like an ISO compliant or standard compliant or audit compliant or whatnot, all
Yeah,
of
'cause they
them
would-
just linger about on older.
You know, like the friends who are really excited because they're finally able to move to ES6.
No, I understand.
Okay.
I,
Okay, so then that's just my lack of experience, or my lack of knowledge and experience.
I've actually worked with some as a site that I had to take a subset of Apple, send it to another group who looks at stuff, and then they said, yes, we can use it.
Okay.
So there are processes, but other sites I know, I couldn't do that. So,
Yeah.
and I'm stuck on RHEL 5.4 because it's the only thing that I can ever use again until I am dead. And my son is dead. My son.
At least that one has that screen, so.
Yeah.
I have a question about.
Yes, no, I was next.
Oh, okay. go
Yes,
ahead.
yes, and no, sorry.
So, instead of drawing trying to look at as far across the border, like towards Debian, which might be, very feasible. We have what we want to call it, a vendor, let's say, of an operating system that does quite a bunch of this stuff in a certain paradigm already. That includes software collections, but that also includes extra entitlements for like your identity management, your relational storage, your high availability, etc. Could we separately, perhaps, look at what would be so problematic that we cannot overcome it if we were to just replicate that model? I.e. what Red Hat does for enterprise Linux already.
Okay, actually, I forgot to put that as a pain point. There's one pain point every developer has run into every dot release, or when something else has come in. All of a sudden, you find out the package you put in EPEL is now in base OS, and it's not the version.
Or optional, by the way, which is also one of your entitlements.
Yes.
Or extras.
Or extras.
Or extras. Yeah.
Or optional extras. Or extras optionals, or, anyway. But anyway, so one of the pain points we've run into is every dot release, we have to figure out what packages we are going to shadow and which ones we are going to say bye-bye, we have to pull from the reload. In the shadow ones, we sometimes do dual installations and sometimes we do we put one in the repo that is always going to be upgraded by a rel.
It's a pretty
But
similar
that's
issue.
something separate.
There's also, related to that, there's also a repository that we do not consider part of our non-conflict standard under pain points. And in those, it's always certain sites want us to conflict, and certain sites want to make sure we don't conflict with those rel packages.
Yeah, I mean, if you
That relates to the former problem, because there's only so many people that are engaged with EPEL that actually have access to RHEL and the full mantra of all entitlement systems. So I have a partner, an ISV partner, not for resale subscription, but yeah, so there's only so many people that have that.
Yeah. And so it's the people that have that who don't want to conflict with those, whereas the people who don't have it.
Well, it's for me, not for resale, so.
Anyway. Guys,
I want to make sure I understood what was just said. You're talking about, for example, people who haven't bought the layered products and get them built as RPMs out of Apple, like cluster or something.
Right.
The people who have bought it don't want it to conflict. People who haven't bought it would love to get the Apple.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so if we're considering like a volatile on the backboards, I think the separation of these product streams is already available from some of the other parties. Red Hat has done that exercise, and it works pretty well for Red Hat. So why don't we replicate that model?
well,
As opposed to looking at how we do.
one of the other big issues,
Consider that.
okay, one of the big issues we ran into was OpenStack. We brought in OpenStack into EPEL.
And you broke Harvard.
Well, we broke a lot of people. Originally we brought in EPEL, because the EPEL OpenStack people said, we really want it in here. We really want it in here. Okay. Wrote it in. They weren't on the idea of, when OpenStack updates, it's a completely new thing. There is no compatibility between OpenStack A and OpenStack B in things. You can have new stuff run in, new stuff taken out. We weren't really aware of that, and we weren't really sure of their model. They weren't aware of, we don't like to break the crap. So what happened was, is they pushed all the new OpenStack to, what was it? But what was the name of it? Icehouse. Moved to Icehouse and Harvard.
It was to E.
What?
Essex? Also to Essex, maybe.
Okay, anyway, it went, lots of other clusters went, because they had Yum, they did Yum at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Our view was we were being stupid, but
Yeah.
and we didn't do it at 2 o'clock in the morning. We did it at 10 a.m. because we wanted to be there fixed.
You weren't
You should actually
prepared
be
though.
named like an enterprise and not just by update line thing. How about that?
Well, anyway, it updated, we ran into a bunch of broken crap, and a lot of people screamed and yelled and pulled OpenStack out of EPEL because we just didn't meet them. We weren't what they needed, and they weren't what we promised. It happened. That's one of the reasons for the EPIC. The ideas for EPIC was that stuff like OpenStack needed to have a place where they could throw their stuff in. The people who are running enterprise Linux that really want to have stuff fast can go there. Whether that works or not, I don't know. We won't know. Okay, so
Well,
back.
I mean, as long as we're talking about the OpenStack thing, it's entirely possible that even that will be enough, because OpenStack is likely to have Icehouse stable branch that exists for a long time. There's still people using Pulsum, including Fedora.
Mhm.
So there may be more than just the very latest and slightly more stable things. They're going to have a parallel stable branch and something along the lines of RHEL 5, 6, and 7.
And they already have a token.
Yeah, so that
It's not, that actually, I would suspect may not be enough of a level. Also, it's not fair to blame OpenStack breaking on Apple. OpenStack is perfectly capable of breaking without the help of any packages.
No, I understand that. I'm sorry. I did not mean to make that a negative on OpenStack. It was more of it happened,
Yeah, no,
and we've had other ones. It was just the one that I knew because of the fact that Harvard broke, and they cried and they cried.
so something good came out.
Very well idea. NFSTEM is going to implement Fedora Playground. And like the outer ring outside Fedora, and it will be implemented as set of copper packages. What about to implement the people as a set project? So what about implementing people as set of projects? And then you can enable all of those whole set, which we call people, but you can individually disable Icehouse current, which will be Oasis current, and keep open house just Grizzly, or I will disable NetHack repo, or whatever.
I'm going to say some way of interacting with Playground is a good idea. I don't think putting, Apple has already, how long have we been doing this now? 8 years?
Yeah, 2006 or 7.
2000. The training for how Apple works is sort of already in motion, and trying to tear out all this and still call it Apple to move to that kind of thing would be breaking all these existing people who we already have. There's an early existing work case, but an application that was in Apple that the person could use that would set up those things and turn them off, that would be okay. All the release repositories may not work well in Apple, but having an application that did it for them in Apple, so that Apple, am I making sense? So if you had this, say we had another organization called Epic Playground. Epic Playground does its thing, it's got its packages in there, it's got all these repositories and such for software collections and all the other stuff. An application that is in Apple that allows you to turn on and off those things would work. Having those things in Apple probably would not work, just because people would not. What the people expect in Apple is a finished application, and everything is sort of tied together.
Yeah, but if you will have different set of repositories, you can say this one is promised to non-bumping version forever, another will be always current.
Storage.
So
No, I understand, I'm just saying that the program that ran the entitlement system in EPEL would be really good. I don't think putting too much into it may work for how we've already flowed. So I think there's a good way of tying the two together, but it's gonna have to be more at the application level than at the procedural level.
There's an inherent conflict of how I think playground is going to work and what Apple is.
Like I said, that's why I think
It's a totally different set of expectations. And so, since Apple is doing quite well right now, I would not want to shoot the golden goose. You know,
Yeah.
keep Apple going. And if we want to experiment with something that's more like the layered products model, which Playground seems to be a lot like that in many ways, we should do that separately and see how it goes. And if it becomes more popular than Apple, well, then we have an answer for, you know, what to put in.
No, but I was not saying to create the copy, the federal playground with the experimental stuff.
No, I understand I know what you're saying. The playground is one thing, what you're saying is another.
It's different.
I think that the tying the two together, there's a way to tie it loosely together, but I don't think we can tie it tightly together at the moment because of the train already out of the station. Was there someone?
I just wanted to add to the last item on the paying list, but maybe you said it already. At least the last time I was looking into it, Santos was shipping their own repositories too, and there was sometimes overlaps with EPEL.
Oh, that's right.
Yes, we are, now that Santos is partially sponsored by Red Hat, and there's more of a marriage, family relationship, cousins, civil partnership between the two.
Inbreeding.
They are happy to talk to us about that and how we can deal with that in the future. It's being worked on. It's just that, like any sort of arranged marriage, there are times where he's nope. All right. So,
I have one more point to that Debbie has a repository home, blah, blah. They also have a protection mechanism against incidentally or unintentionally updating packages from what.
I'm going to be printing across into the US. I don't think that should work.
They have a protection mechanism that allows you to say no major or no major minor version of this. Which of course requires programmatic source code management on the upstream side, but you know, it's a mechanism to mitigate unpleasant surprises.
Is that on the client side?
Yeah.
So another thing I was going to say is, come on. What I'd like to propose is that we have all of a sudden, I have a deep voice that I can hear. No, I can't. Anyway, what I'd like to propose is a policy change to allow for regular major changes in Apple. And this would be something where we can't just willy-nilly change stuff. We can't just update to NetHack 6 when NetHack 5.9 is gone. You have to wait until the next
No, for CentOS.
Right.
We just said
Yes,
we're
yes.
waiting for CentOS.
But that's all based, CentOS doesn't update until RHEL updates. But
Yeah.
so I'm going with the trigger of RHEL because
Almost.
There will be something at some point called rental that Greg had. I better be careful.
Eventuality says.
Anyway, when 7.1 comes out, we start a process of a 60-day thing. We announce it. Everyone can update when they want to stuff. They have to announce it to the list. Any packages, we work together on getting packages reviewed if they need to be reviewed. And then we basically package up and make a release of Apple. And that would be the release tree of Apple. So there'd be something like Apple, F-E, that would have,
Yeah, what are we not use the same height or
something like that. I'm making this bad. And then,
Yeah, and then seven, just to make sure we become a similar to seven, but the question is, also, is 7.0 still around at this point?
I would say that we archived it.
Sure, but it is that far around.
Yeah, it's archived, but around. And if somebody wants to maintain it, they can maintain it. But
And we have the structure that facilitates that in principle, it's just not something we're interested in doing, so.
yeah. But basically that we break it out so that it fixes your problem of you can do a young downgrade and go back to whatever we had the release of. And it also makes it so that regular stuff is. Now, the one problem is, what happens when a package is new between 7.1? If I have a new package in Fedora, 20 is out, do I branch it to 20 again and it goes into everything? Okay.
And only evidence.
Okay. That's what I would,
That's what you guys do.
yeah.
So then what do you do about CDs in like 7.0, once 7.1 is out?
But
I
yeah,
mean, if I understood the archive process correctly.
It's just like how it happens now. I mean, if you were running 12, Fedora 12, you're running Fedora 12 and every CVE, it's,
So this is more or less formally saying we're only supporting the most recent
Correct.
release of
correct.
enterprise Linux.
yeah, but then still allow for the structure to reintroduce the actual
So
widespread.
and so this gets what you were talking about before, where it's like, well, someone really wants to support what was Apple for, something, they can either pay someone to do it or
Yeah. And after that, we could have a similar thing with that takes the
I give them these forward and do the chain out, we send to the power of one, send to the power of two, and like that version all the way beyond.
but the other thing is, there is some stuff that doesn't match any of the rules. There are things where we have, one of the other pain points is Python, Ruby, Java.
Ruby is not a pain point, I can perfectly well make that backwards compatible and parallel and scalable and
Currently, we have pain points in Ruby, Java, and Python. You have 2 seconds to fix it.
So that's tough, because those are all base OS packages. Thanks.
But
So
I
we're
need-
catching that things.
I need Python 2.4 and Python 3.5 and Python 2.7 on my, or I need Ruby 1.8.
On your what?
on my cluster of EL5, EL6, and EL7 systems.
So isn't this where software collections is going and stats and?
Yes, and I think this is one of
Simply parallel, but keep that.
Or in the future, Docker is going.
Yeah. The case is, in some places, we have to say that we can support some of this, and other stuff maybe would be a good solution that people who are needing it should look at software collections and see how that works for them.
I think at this point, because if you have the opportunity to run RHEL, it doesn't matter which one you run, subscription-wise. So EL5 being 2.4, EL6 being close to 2.6.
EL 6 is 2.6, and EL 7
Right. So whether you do this sent to us style or with a subscriptions already give you a path to software collections, which is to say maybe that's not a problem for us to solve, and this is therefore also that you would hugely be doing to entertain central systems. Also, isn't Hopper a means for people to like create and possibly also maintain to a certain level of quality, whatever the fuck they want?
Yes. And sometimes that's the thing, it's just knowing when that is, and on our part of the EPEL side. The thing is, EPEL's become really an anarchic socialist collective. We can argue about that. In that we haven't had oh, that was my last thing. Article.
Government, that's ambitious.
Government.
We will wait for the governments to react.
Sorry, I don't want to go that way, because there will
It does an Apple Congress and all of a sudden it starts functioning.
which means basically formalizing and agreeing on certain rules that are written down and aren't just, well, I don't remember, didn't we say we decided we were going to, and who decides that? Which probably means God, I'm glad I didn't put an R with it. My finger. Yes. No, it was the E. 'Cause my finger hit between the E and the R.
Yes, you have that.
Yes, I have fingers. Anyway, I'm just putting that out of reforming the band. Yeah, sorry, that's a joke from the 1940s movies. What I'm trying to say is that we need to come up with a better form of who gets to decide stuff versus who yells the most, or at least formalize that.
I don't think elections are going to work. I'm just reminded that, like, was it the docs team for Nora that had they had a steering committee for a long time, just like we had a steering committee for a long time, and then they really decided, it doesn't work. We try and elect people, I don't know,
Yeah.
people, and then they don't show up,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. But we should probably, but yes, we could formalize something, we could formalize.
What I want to,
What was like a recording, we could formalize on a single reader instead of a group of readers.
I just want to avoid the FBC issue where it's for life, which is what we sort of gone to with the people who were there at the beginning, because we stuck around and haven't left. Finally, it's,
Well, I mean, we've gotten rid of Mike McGrath.
but,
Yeah, that was well there.
is there any other ideas for things that would help?
Well,
That's from rows up there? Because
Over here, although I was down there before, so. I don't know.
Oh.
No, you've got a mustache on now. I don't know who you are. Sir, I've never met you
It's
before.
just something that the upstream provider of CentOS does is something that's called an advisory group, which is comprised of who we know to be large consumers of some things, or people who come forward as large consumers. It's not binding, but at least we then have a reasonable sounding board for a large number of people who are using it in anger, which is sometimes more important than as you point out, the loudest group of people who are using it, who may not actually represent the interests of the largest group.
And the thing is I honestly do not know who these people are. I know their IPs.
You have to do some outreach.
I know their IP addresses. I don't know who.
That might not be a bad way of forming an initial list of candidates.
Anything else? Yeah, we're good. Anyone else on the higher roads? Going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. Okay, second row.
One thing, one of the biggest reasons I showed up was trying to figure out if we want to start doing any automated testing on Apple. It's something that has come up in the past, and it's something that we generally said no to, just because we haven't had the resources. But it's something I'm open to, and just wasn't quite sure if that is desired, if that is going to be useful, and how that's going to work. Because depending on how far we take it, I can think of some pain points that would already exist, but it's really going to depend on what's acceptable. Specifically, I know we're using some content to is a 2.7 only stop in the task control. So that could cause problems in Apple 5 and Apple 6, but it's possible we can get rid of some of that, and there's...
You want to be that
Just start with Grill 7. I mean, if that's the problem, just start with Grill 7, and we'll either figure it out.
And that's another way to do it. And it's just because I know it's something that people have been asking for
I
a
would-
while, and I think we're starting, I'm not going to say it's going to happen this week, but I think it's something we're going to be more capable of doing going forward.
Yeah,
So that's one of the reasons I wanted to come to this.
Yes, I would say I think a lot of people would be very happy with automated testing because the fact is a lot of businesses run Apple and rely on Apple, and they do their own automated testing to make sure that they're not getting stuff. So maybe they could get,
Such as the 2 a.m. That's why I'm there.
yes, that's their best way of testing it. All right. It's 4:15. It's about 55 degrees Celsius in here. So I was going to say, instead of staying here, and I say that because it's about that down here, and I expect all the heat's risen. So you guys are probably dehydrated, boiled, broiled, and partially cooked.
I think the radiation from your shirt is a contributing factor, sir.
You should see it in the dark. It glows. No. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for showing up. Is there any questions or stuff that people would like to know? Please, sir. I'll tell you that after a minute.
On the proposal with those releases, would that mean we only support the latest release?
Yes.
Okay, so that would be an advantage compared to Epic because it's more or less just another branch to maintain.
Yes. You only support at 7.1 or 7.2, 7.3, and if you are going to support 7.0, it's up to you, and you do it not here.
Well, you could do there, not with the expectation.
Well, you can't push stuff to Fedora 12 updates. That's what I mean. Because it's archived. Once it's archived, we don't push anything to it anymore.
That's fair enough. But so if somebody says, I really don't need 7.0, then he's on the receiving end of all the costs associated in order to...
And you can do his own code for it. Yeah.
7.0 from the archive, including the code tracks and all those,
And if he pays me in $75 an hour for just getting out of bed, I will think about it.
That's not unfair,
Yeah.
but what about this potential value proposition? On recurring services based on Apple, including making sure that all your packages like are either in or work or. Because we're not civilians, remember, and so most systems are civilians. They don't have anything with packaging or.
Okay, well,
There's no way that Apple is going to
have to pay for that. You could do it yourself, you could create.
You can get that.
Sure, yeah, but.
Anyone else? Otherwise, I think I'm going to close this out at 5 and say we're done, and everyone go find some place to get some water before they. But the last thing I want to say. Where did it go? It was so pretty. No, that's not it. That's not pretty. You know, oh, it died. Oh, it's so good. What I was going to say is I'm very happy about the size of Apple. Apple has become huge just by the number of people who I can actively check and see who are there. The number of people who I don't know, I've been told I have 100,000, well, I have. Apple has 500,000 users that don't check anything, that are used in giant clusters, and I only see it as one IP address. So the work people here, if you are working on Apple, is really appreciated by lots of people all over the world, from places from Facebook and some other places that if you use a social media or something like that. So anyway, thank you and quit. Autistic is not. Oh.